Hey, welcome back. Today this is going to be fun. Sony had a hell of a week, and today we're going to have a beautiful time going through all of it. We had an apology for Neil Druckmann because they realized they put words in his mouth. Kind of hilarious. We have an investor call that told us that half the PlayStation audience is still on the PS4, and half of PlayStation's money is coming from third-party live services. Then we had a state of play that managed to basically just annoy people with the promise of even more first-party live services. Yeah, Concord set the world on fire. At the very least, though, there is Astrobot, which may end up just being the sleeper hit. So, let's work back. Let's see how the current console, big dominant silverback, how its position might be a little bit more fragile than it seemed. Because yes, it does seem to be very commanding. Go into any game store as I did last weekend, right? And you will see that Sony have got double or more the shelf space allocation of Xbox. So, will the Sony ponies make it to the Grand National and win? Or will the men at the front be forced to kill them for their meat? Let's find out. In this episode brought to you by the other thing that we do, which is Loading Screen. If you'd like the news as it happens straight from my research team to your inbox, hit up bellular.games, and it's also the best way you can support our mission. And of course, you get more content as well. Okay, with that said, let's go. Sony's very fun, very okay, happy week. I'll kick it off with the state of play. So this was the first major conference of the showcase season, right? And as for how did it go? Well, Jeff Keighley did a poll, and he said, how would you grade the broadcast? We see 5.7% saying A, but by the time we hit D, it's pretty bad. 41.6% saying D or below, and this is from 114,948 votes. That's quite a lot of votes. Now, obviously, there will be a little bit of a sampling bias. Usually something being bad or disappointing like that does lead to more of a, get out the vote, but still, that's not great. And of course, Jeff Keighley, this is not some niche, YouTuber whose audience are furious. No, this is Jeff Keighley, the man of the Doritos, man of the people, who I think will be appealing to a lot more of that IGN audience. You ask around the communities that we're in, and very few people read IGN, yet they are absolutely humongous, showing that there is a very, very large, moderately engaged audience. That's who Jeff reaches to. Even they are giving that sort of rating. So, God of War Ragnarok coming to PC in September, and their new live service Concord was unveiled, and neither of these were that well received. So, Steam audiences obviously not thrilled that God of War is going to require a PSN account because it's got no online functionality. Now, this is, of course, for Sony, all, their unified PlayStation ecosystem. So in the way that Team Xbox wants Xbox to be more than just a console, Xbox is life. It's on your TV, it's on your phone, it's on your PC. Sony actually want a little bit of that as well. And to be fair to them, it's not as upfront annoying as, say, Games for Windows Live was, if you remember that absolutely horrible experience, but it's just unnecessary, right? It's unnecessary. Even though for Sony, it means they are getting account data, they're getting more, obviously, they're getting more telemetry, things that actually they do find to be useful. Basically, this is great for business intelligence, and for online games, it, of course, is fantastic for, having their unified moderating system that is operating on the PSN account level, right? Thing is, though, look at Ghost of Tsushima. That is a game that you don't need to sign into your PSN account on unless you want to do the online mode. So this being done for God of War really does seem absurdly stupid and a bit of a cell phone. So Sony are losing there. But also, they're kind of losing on Concord. Concord is coming out in August, and it is the PS5 hero shooter. So everyone looks at that and says, okay, you're doing a bit of Overwatch with some Guardians of the Galaxy, a little bit of Destiny, and maybe some older Star Wars aesthetics or something. It all does make sense. The developer Firewalk is built from ex-Bungie devs, and you can see what Sony want here. In the same way that Yves and team over at Ubisoft, they wanted to have their Battle Royale, their extraction shooter, their this, their that, an entry in every genre. Here, what do you have? You've got Destiny 2, that's your big PvE loot shooter. Obviously, there's PvP elements there, but the PvP player base of Destiny have not felt amazing, though they have been throwing some bones recently. But anyway, you got that. You got Marathon for your extraction shooting element. And then, of course, we've got Firewalk to take on Overwatch 2. There's a Sony entry in every sort of form of, of where that direction of game could go. So what this is a 5v5 original narrative-driven hero shooter, and that is going to be a thing that's a tough sell in 2024, especially when everyone's looking at Marvel Rivals and thinking, wow, I can see where you went for some inspiration in that one. So, little bit of a rough thing, and it is quite strange that in this year we're seeing more hero shooter competition. As far as Concord goes, honestly, I'm not feeling mega grim. I think this could find a bit of a place in the market, and a lot of that is because people are not really down for Overwatch as a narrative, right? Recently, I've been talking to people who I know that were humongous Overwatch fans, not just in the competitive side, but also the characters, the world, the vibe. And for them, even though they still admit, yeah, it's a fun game, Overwatch just doesn't hit them in the emotional way that it used to. And that means they're doing other things, playing other games, because it turns out it's not just about having good mechanics. It is about your game as an emotional experience that these emotional beings called humans want to pick up on. And that's where we move to Astrobot, the cute little robot that actually does do quite well on all of those fronts. This is a linear, family-friendly adventure based on, of course, the Astro stuff that shipped with every single PS5. Now, for most of us, we looked at Astro and thought, yeah, this robot looks like a PS5. That's weird. What's going on? But when people actually went and they did stuff in Astro's Playground, it was really good. So that actually could be a bit of a sleeper hit if that's the sort of thing that you're very much down for. And that's even to the point where the frickin' BBC are saying that Astrobot is the thing that was the show stealer, not Concord. And we're soon going to realize why that actually might give the people over at Sony the willies. But before we get to them getting the willies, let's talk about the apology. So we covered the Neil Druckmann interview. We saw all of the headlines of like, Neil Druckmann says this, Neil Druckmann says that. And we all just kind of thought to ourselves, something does not look right here. This is an interview posted not under PlayStation, but under Sony.com. And then we started thinking, okay, who are the PR people in this organization who will be doing this interview? How is this actually happening? And then we went and tried to put it in the context of the other interviews. And overall, we basically thought that it looks like Neil is being sort of misrepresented in some of these things, and a lot just doesn't pass the field test. A lot of that's because if a story appeals to your emotions immediately, that is like the number one time to be really skeptical, because that's when you're most able to be misled. And it's weird. So to sum all of this up, they interviewed Neil Druckmann internally, and then they published an article that essentially was advertorial, very much aimed at Sony investors, talking about the amazing Sony technologies and, embracing the future. But of course, anyone at PlayStation and anyone who knows gaming audiences would see that, artists, people who work in the games industry, and think, oh dear, that's bad. Now, Druckmann pointed out that he did not say some of these things in a tweet, and then presumably somebody at Sony has realized we actually did mess up here. They said this: in re-reviewing our recent interview with Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann, we have found several significant errors and inaccuracies that don't represent his perspective and values. And for me, the thing is, if this was done by PlayStation, I would be ripping them to shreds, but it was done by Sony. And it reminds me of the sort of thing that happened to me recently. Our other channel is a World of Warcraft channel. I know, I lamau, but look, they got their hooks into me a long time ago. Now, I got a sponsor email from a PR team that I know is basically like Activision sends out the contract, and they wanted to sponsor me doing a video about Mists of Pandaria Remix on my World of Warcraft channel, where I was already doing videos about Mists of Pandaria Remix. And that only happens if PR people who basically don't understand product and audience are involved. And here it is Sony people, it is Sony PR people. What are they thinking about? They're thinking about shooting on a volume like The Mandalorian. They're thinking about Sony televisions. They're thinking about OLED displays. They're thinking about all the things that Sony do. And to them, game is just a product. They don't understand. All the rest of Sony is thinking, oh my god, AI accelerated. But obviously, they don't know how it's going to land with the gaming audience. So they basically said, sorry. Of course, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, and we will see if they do any ghoulish things in the future. Next then, the investor call. And I know this is the sort of thing that may be really dry and boring, but trust me, there are some absolutely juicy scoops in this one. So the incoming co-CEOs of PlayStation, Herman Hulst and Hideaki Nishino, I think I've got Hideaki's name right. Anyway, they delivered a update, right, on the company's performance, and they answered questions from investors. So Sony are arguing that this is their most profitable generation. They've achieved 1.6 billion in sales and 10 billion in operating income over only 5 years. That's faster than the PS4 by a full year. I suppose there's another thing going on where, hey, if you have US dollar and you want to go for a holiday to Japan, now's the time to do it. The yen has just has fallen. And that will be interesting for their business, because obviously whenever the yen is really strong, you often see a lot of like the export Japanese companies being a little bit, this isn't great for us. But where it gets interesting is going beneath the surface. As of March 31st, they are claiming they've got 118 million monthly active users on their platform, 9,000 games, 2,000 publishers. And this is not PS5 only, this is PlayStation, the big platform, right? So PS4 and PS5. Now, they've expanded on all of this. 56 million PS5s have been sold through by the time of this reporting. But if you look at the graph, you can see that half of the PlayStation audience are on PS4 rather than PS5. But there's nearly double the hours spent on PS5 in terms of gameplay. And this tells us two things. Number one, people are, in many cases, not upgrading, and it's not because of the availability issues that were there with stock. They can buy a PS5 if they want to, they are choosing not to, or I would say they're literally not making a choice. That choice hasn't existed within their possibility space because they don't feel the need to upgrade. The second point is that the people who are buying PS5s are the more engaged people and therefore more likely to be power users who will be spending more money. And that is evident from the lifetime to date spend on the console. You can see the downloadable content has nearly tripled in growth, while PS Plus has grown by half. But I think very notably, the full game price sales are a drop of 12% compared to the PS4. Of course, this is reporting in revenue, not in unit sales, and that's kind of interesting. That revenue's down, obviously. The cost of those games is a little bit up. Now, this does suggest that the PlayStation audience are not buying as many games, but they are spending a lot more money on add-on content, like for free-to-play games. Again, you have downloadable content tripling, while full game prices decrease 12%. And this is all competing for the same dollars. So it's, where are those dollars going? The conclusion here is a bit obvious. You don't need a PS5 to play Fortnite, right? If you have, say, a PS4, maybe a PS4 Pro, right? A PS4 Pro, then, yeah, maybe you don't feel the need, because perhaps all you do is you play some FIFA. You play some FIFA, you play a bit of Call of Duty. Like, the next Call of Duty game is coming out on PS4. Like a decade-old bit of hardware? And so in this world where the traditional model of new console, big new expensive games, where that is not really seeing as much growth as the sort of additional content, well, that is why Sony are continually sort of framing all of this as the first step to a great PlayStation experience, with television shows, services, and additional peripherals like the PS Portal and the PSVR 2. Of course, it does seem the PSVR 2 was an underperformer. That being said, it is an extremely comfortable piece of VR kit, and certainly you look at the Meta Quest 3, there are newer things that are definitely very competitive, but coming up soon for $60 is actually the hardware dongle that will allow you to put your PSVR 2 onto your PC. And, then I think get a proper VR experience where you're not limited to buying overpriced stuff on PlayStation. Anyway, full game content is pretty much exactly the same. The major franchise titles like our FIFAs and our CODs are driving over 50% of all PlayStation Store revenue. And that just obviously makes complete sense. Year over year, they've had 5% growth in their services. That's from the premium and the extra tiers. And only 35% of PS Plus users are actually signed up to a non-essential tier. And to me, that is kind of interesting, because you do look at that and you think, man, that is such a deal. But I suppose if you have some of the PS Plus collection, you're not really going to feel the need. And as much as me and you might think it's really cool to, go and play some old PS1 game, I mean, like I even sort of personally, professionally know somebody who described the Xbox 360 as a retro games console. A retro games console, the Xbox 360 that Halo 4 and co came out in. Yes, we do live in the crazy times. Time is literally going on. Things are changing, audiences are changing, and unless you realize that to some people the Xbox 360 is a boomer retro console, because like that's the sort of person who is spending their money on Fortnite skins. Until we, I suppose, the crusty old, I mean for me, like crusty old 29-year-old, that seems completely insane. Until we recognize that fact, we're going to continually misunderstand the largest movements in the industry. Now, of course, I'm not moving in that direction. I want to make single-player narrative games. That's our jam. But we got to understand what's actually going on big picture, because that will explain what these companies are doing. So overall then, what we're seeing is a picture of things slowing down and a consolidation behind core titles. Very much they're driving growth through value adds and live services. So I suppose in a world where PS Plus's more premium offerings do actually give you an insane amount of value in terms of the amount of video game content, at the end of the day, that's not Call of Duty, right? It's not COD, it's not Minecraft, it's not Fortnite. People don't want to know. Only 35% are going for that. And I think Microsoft have seen that with Game Pass. And this is where I can offer you a little bit of insight. Again, just context. I know a lot of people, you don't know our full sort of story. We've released an indie game, The Pale Beyond, last year. Teams like literally over there working on our future stuff. So that's kind of what we do. And that does mean that between knowing indie publishers and our peers in the industry, we do have a bit of a picture of the sort of financial state of things. Xbox Game Pass deals used to be just mad. They were just happening and happening and happening. But what's actually happened is Microsoft have seen that as much as it's a great story to be like, oh, hey, indies, would you like to, be a connoisseur of these artisan, auteur experiences from indies on Game Pass? And most people have just been like, nah, bro, I don't give a shit. I want to play COD and Fortnite, dude. And that's why you're not seeing as many Game Pass deals. You're seeing a slowing of content coming onto Game Pass, but you are seeing things like Diablo 4, which will be a serious growth driver for it. And it is similar with PlayStation, and we're seeing so many companies talk about the overall audience of the core gaming audience overall is not growing, or at least is not growing as fast as it used to. I think you look at those PS5 sales and the struggles in transitioning people from the PS4 generation, and that is extremely clear. We live in the world of bing, bing, wahoo, immediate shit, and while we're living in that world, we got to think about, say, Netflix. Netflix used to talk about how for them competition, does include Fortnite, it includes screen stuff. And now we see the recent data where YouTube has completely pulled ahead of Netflix in terms of hours watched. Do you know why that is? It's more engaging. To do something on Netflix, you've got to go and look at a thing that a bunch of creatives made, and you've got to put effort into understanding a narrative instead of just YouTube short, swipe, swipe, swipe. Oh, look, this is a man with guns screaming about Glockmas. Fantastic. I want to watch Glockmas. And that's the way that it goes. And this is impacting the games companies as well. So with this overall, it's no surprise that this is what Sony wants to do. Number one, single-player, narrative-focused games, the likes of God of War, Spider-Man, that they have made their name on. These are still really strong things for their brand. Then, partner studios, things like Bluepoint and Nixies, working with them on ports, Valkyrie Entertainment for general support, and then evolving/multi-genre, and this is where the fun kind of starts. You've got Guerrilla making some VR games, and the rumored co-op Horizon game to sort of get them into that category. There's Bend Studio, they should be in the first category based on Days Gone, but that maybe suggests that their next game is maybe a departure. The next pillar is the live game focus. They have 5 studios who are basically doing this kind of thing. This will be providing a backbone of revenue to keep Sony able to do their other games so that they can keep their brand in a dominant position. I mean, looking at the data that you and me have just looked at, you can certainly understand why the bigwigs are saying live services now. Because look at all of the Fortnite and COD going on. We need that to be our thing, not just these third parties, because if they're third parties, then we are exposed to risk. There is then some talk about layoffs and closures, especially the London studio. One framed these as organizational hygiene in order to allow for future growth. Herman referred back to these being short-term things based on the adjustments from pandemic expectations, because everybody saw line go up and did not think. As for Bungie, there were some specific questions around when PlayStation expects to break even on that purchase, and they're not expected to be profitable post-transaction this past fiscal year on their own terms, and this is explained by the significant spend that is happening on the development of Marathon. Halst then answered overall by framing Bungie's value in terms of how they are being further integrated into SIE via their support for live services, which of course will be taking you into the likes of Concord. And there are one or two, like, kind of decently neat things that they seem to be wanting to do with Concord to make it not be the worst of a regular live service. But of course, live service is a business that is enabled by the network effect, so unless you hit that critical mass, you're just boned. And we need to see if they're able to hit that critical mass. But I think fears of that will be somewhat allayed by the whole situation with Helldivers. I mean, Spider-Man 2 sold 11 million copies in 6 months before any DLCs or sales had happened. Helldivers 2, though, it sold 12 million in 4 months, of course, with premium Warbond DLC that many people will be buying once a month when it drops. And that is why PlayStation's lineup looks the way that it does. These latter 5 games will be making more money than the regular tentpole titles per their plan. Of course, the tentpoles won't be going anywhere. They do see these to be a core thing. They want one every single year, right, in time for the holidays. And one of the reasons there is because it gets them respect, it grows their brand, and, it adds some of those intangible, just like that intangible IP value, right? Last of Us was obviously very successful. Now it's turned into the TV show. Uncharted turned into a movie franchise. These games, they're doing more than just earning their money back. There's other things. But still, their transformational titles are the live services, and those are meant to be the real drivers of growth for the core PlayStation unit. And that's because they're seeing that is where they're getting new audiences in proven genres. And experimental niche stuff, well, that seems like it will be severely limited in terms of scope and volume as a part of a sort of risk mitigation strategy, which in fairness, does kind of make sense. As much as Guerrilla making a VR thing is cool to me, I really like VR, I do know for the vast majority of people, they just could not care less. That then brings us to what's got a lot of headlines. It was a Q&A by Hulst and Nishino, and essentially they said that their expectation is that core PS5 games will release on console first. Now, a lot of people have said this is hubris, that Sony are asking PC users to spend $500 on a console to play games. And it's funny because those games could be sequels to games that they're playing on their PC right now. But in a way, that's not what's happening. To kind of go through it in a bit more detail, Hulst doesn't see this as denying PC players a game on launch. Instead of console versus PC, for them, they say it is about allocated resources and value. If PC players see value in getting a guaranteed stable experience, per Hulst, they can go to the PS5 for the games when they're new, like everybody else. Otherwise, they can wait for the port. And there is a degree of sensibility in this, right? And that's basically whenever they're making, so take Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 cost, $315 million to make? Or was it 220? Whatever, it was a stupid amount of money, right? Now, if you then had to make that multi-plat, you would have so many more technical risk factors that could delay aspects of development, right? And you guys all know, we've talked in the past, Frostbite engine, all the problems that's caused for devs. We all know what's going on there. So I think their strategy here is that for those games that are architected from the ground up to be big PS5 first, those teams do their best job in the PS5 version, and then that game goes away over to someone like Nixies. And they, who are experts in porting, will do their job. I mean, remember, and I know that their ports have not always been great. Hello, Horizon Zero Dawn launch. But man, remember the God of War port? Remember people talking about, holy shit, I am playing God of War on an APU. That was crazy. So that's what they're doing for those kind of games. And of course, those are going to be the cutting edge ones where they will be pushing the PS5 to its limits. Whereas for a live service game, that is going to be architected to be more multi-plat from the ground up as a core part of development. So I understand where they're coming from. Obviously, I would like a really great experience on PC on day one. Who wants a Jedi Survivors launch? Nobody does, right? That was a terrible shame. And again, PC is not Sony's primary concern. Money is. PC is a way to generate some more revenue for things they've already invested heavily in. And, they only need a small uptake of PC sales to recoup their porting costs. Where they see the money coming from in PC is the live services, and I think a lot of the graphs and the data that we've covered earlier in today's episode shows that. They see live services as the growth area, and they know that live services can work fantastically on PC. And it's not like the wait seems to hurt them that much. PC gamers are a patient bunch. And that is a good quality. Take Ghost of Tsushima. It came out when PC audiences were primed to be the most skeptical about Sony. It was unavailable in 180 countries, yet it did sell astonishingly well. It soared to the charts of top gross on Steam, which of course does make a hell of a lot of sense. So they like PC, but they're not going to let PC specific stuff really dictate their big sort of macro strategy. The other thing then is mobile, of course. That's basically for them just working with partners like NCSoft. And it's a little bit more slow and measured. Obviously, Gacha Game Land is giga humongo bucks, as some may say. I don't know. Zenless Zone Zero, that's coming out pretty soon. I'm sure a lot of people will spend a hell of a lot of money on that. You even have, I've forgotten which one it was, but they basically were like, we lost a lot, you know, our AAA games did not do well. But you know what really saved our ass? Blue Archive. So obviously they want that. You can also see throughout this that it's a very, very kind of like risk managed approach to development, right? Sony does not want PlayStation to take risks, and to me that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Sony is not a Lambo factory for employees by making televisions. Like, as an overall group, Sony have long been far less healthy and far less stable than Microsoft. So if Xbox just goes kaput, Satya can just be like, whatever, it's fine. AI, Project Stargate, let's go. But if that happens with PlayStation, Sony is in a lot more of a pickle. So TLDR, more Helldivers 2, more money printers, please. I don't know if you can keep me up with Helldivers news, but there's stuff going on with black holes and maybe a third faction, the Protoss-like dudes coming back. That would be kind of neat. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. There was so much Sony news, I just thought, right, we need to do the mother of Sony videos, just going through all of it. I hope then that this maybe can inform your purchase decisions, help you perhaps expect what is to come from this company, maybe calibrate some of your expectations. At the very least, I think that following the business here, it's important. It's not sexy, but it is important. But to me, it actually is interesting because you sort of go into the guts of it, you see how the sausage is made, and suddenly those inexplicable things that make you really angry, I think they turn to being disappointing, but understandable. And I think that's a far more healthy state of being to be in. So there you go. Let me know what you think. And yeah, I don't know. Are you gonna double dip? You gonna be one of Sony's double dippers for the next big AAA narrative game? I can tell you, I will not. I will not. Anyway, have a wonderful day. We'll be back tomorrow, and I'll see you then.